Great. Hi, I'm Ellery Foutch. I'm an associate professor in the American Studies program at Middlebury College. I teach classes on the art and material culture of the United States, and this semester I'm teaching a class called Remembering the American Revolution, 1776 to 2026. And today we're here at the Henry Sheldon Museum, where students in the class are going to share some of the research about their objects and about our shared exhibit conducted with support of the Axon Humanities Lab at Middlebury. Thanks.
We are here at the Henry Sheldon Museum in Middlebury, Vermont, conducting research as part of our American Studies class, Remembering the American Revolution, 1776 to 2026, a public humanities lab at Middlebury College.
We're speaking with Nancy Foster about her memories of the bicentennial and making of the Middlebury bicentennial quilt. Thank you for joining us, Nancy.
Happy to.
And before we begin talking about the quilt itself, can you tell us what you were like in 1975 to 1976 and how you spent your days and what was important to you?
At that point in my life, I had three young daughters. I have three daughters. They were born in 1969, 71, and 72. So I was a stay-at-home mom. My husband was then and still is a dairy farmer here in Middlebury. So he worked about 12-hour days. So he was very much there, very supportive, but not physically there to help take care of children. So I spent my days in those years taking care of three young daughters. And I was talking with someone here, and she knows my youngest daughter who works at the Middlebury College. My daughters, as you might imagine, since that was 50 years ago, are all in their 50s now. So that was my day, taking care of three young kids. There were no large daycare centers at that point. Any daycare for people in my age group at that time was a friend or another mother or a relative. Mary Johnson Daycare, Otter Creek Daycare, all those places did not exist.
I see. Thank you. And let's talk about this beautiful quilt. I know that this quilt making practice wasn't that uncommon back in the 1970s and the 1980s. So can you tell us a little bit about how you first became involved in this bicentennial quilt making program?
Sure. It was basically a project that was organized by people in the Congregational Church here in Middlebury, which is the big white church up at the head of Main Street, which is still very much there. We did quite a bit for the bicentennial. The woman who was in charge of it, Faith Scholes, was an older woman that I admired and really liked. She had been my high school biology teacher, and she had recently retired. And so I became involved in it because I attended the church, but because the woman who was organizing it knew me from being a high school student, and I really liked her and probably would have done anything reasonable that she asked me to do, period. So making a quilt square, and that was my involvement. What she did was reach out to however number of, we're all women who made these, and we all made a quilt square. There was a small group of people that assembled them with the blue around them, and they did that together. And I checked with one of my daughters last night to be sure. I am 99% sure my mother-in-law, who is also a very active member of that church, was one of the ones who helped put the quilt together. So my involvement was, and it was true for everybody who made these squares, except for Faith, who made one of them. Our involvement was picking out the topic of a square we were going to make, going home and making it and handing it in.
And to add on to that, what do you remember most vividly about the process of making the quilt with other women in the community? Any memories from that? And then when you look at the quilt now, which square brings back the best memory or has the most impact to you?
Well, the most memories for me is the one I made. We did it individually. We probably had at the most one meeting. It was very much a project where we took them home. Okay, you involved a few other questions. What didn't I answer you want me to?
Just any memories from making the quilt with other women. I know you brought them home, but
Yeah, it was a group project, but in many ways it was an individual project.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about your specific square?
I made a square of a farm because my husband is a dairy farmer, and probably other than my mother-in-law, who was also married to a dairy farmer, they're probably the only farmers, and they wanted something to depict agriculture because agriculture is an important part of Addison County and this area. So I made a farm. Our farm does not look like this. I made a farm scene that would be very clear to everybody that it was a farm. So I did a very traditional red barn with the old hip style roof. We don't use those and hadn't back then. When we came back to the farm in 1971, we were in a much more modern barn, which is since not used for dairy, and we have an even more modern barn. But I wanted it to look like what I thought people would look at it and immediately think agriculture.
Perfect. At the time, did you think this quilt mainly as a commemorative object or for the bicentennial, or did it feel more community-centered?
It was really both.
I'm wondering, it's more broader question compared to the quilt itself. What was the atmosphere around Middlebury, the town, and probably not only, the town, but surrounding villages during the bicentennial celebrations back 50 years ago? Is there any other very significant commemorative activities were going on?
Oh, there were a lot of activities. In fact, one thing I did was when I was talking to the daughter I was talking to last night, she said, "Oh, Mom, I still remember the dress you made me." I made her kind of a long dress with a pinafore over it to look old, because there were a lot of things going on around town that my daughters could wear these dresses to, which was fun. The 70s were quite different. Now, I can only really speak from the perspective of somebody who was a teenager in the 60s. And we were so glad the 60s were over. The 60s were, so there was a lot of celebration and joy in the 70s. I'm not feeling that anymore, really. But I'm looking at two young men who may or may not be U.S. citizens, but if you were a young man and you were an American citizen, you got drafted. And your chances of going to Vietnam were incredibly high. And so people in my age bracket who were teenagers, whether we were men or women, were very, very aware of the Vietnam War and what it meant to our generation and to our country. So by the time we get to the mid-70s, it was like, it's over. We're so glad. The 70s were a really nice time.
So
For people in my age group, I don't know how older
Yeah.
people felt.
you feel it's more promising compared to 60s. So that's why not only for the 200-year celebration, but also for a kind of revival, like after the war.
It felt like a good time for our country.
Thank you. And also, like, I'm wondering because, like, when we're like doing research on the every like square of this quilt, we feel it's more about local theme, like
Totally local.
totally local, like
Totally
especially
local. There was
yeah.
no
Number
intention
yeah.
to have anything that wasn't a part of Addison County.
Yeah.
I mean, all these buildings are either in Middlebury or close to Middlebury. Most of them are in Middlebury. It was very much intended to be a local.
Yeah. So that comes to my puzzle, like because like the celebration of American history by 76 was like a national event.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we were doing a quilt
Yeah.
that
So how?
commemorated the
Yeah.
local.
Yeah. That. So how did you and other like makers of this quilt think about the relationship between American history and Middlebury history when you were making this project?
I don't think we spent a lot of time analyzing that question at all. I think we were just focused on putting something together that would commemorate what the Middlebury area was like at that period of time. I don't think any of us were analyzing.
So, like, I think definitely you'll feel, as you said, like 70s Middlebury is what you want to depict in this quilt. And after 50 years, I think there's a lot of changes happen on this piece of land. So,
There are.
what's like
Although some of them
are still there? Yeah.
are much the same.
Yeah.
But you have things like the fire station,
Yeah.
which is the second one down. It's had a big addition put on it since then. It doesn't look like that. The Charter House still looks the same.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Borg and Horse Farm. Still looks the same.
And a railway station. Yeah.
Railroad station still looks the same, even though it's got, the structure out and back. People are still skiing. This never was intended to look like much of anything. The Dog Team Tavern burned to the ground quite a few years ago, and
That's sad.
so it doesn't exist. The Middlebury Inn is still very recognizable. The town green is, a lot of the buildings are actually very much the same, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, but like, as a general speaking, when I think of Middlebury as a town, how different Middlebury is now compared to 50 years ago, like from your personal feeling? Yeah.
It's grown. Compared to other parts of the country, we're more the same than, I don't think we've changed as much as many parts of our country. And maybe just looking at these buildings helps make me think that, because there have been gradual changes over, and my family moved here in 1960, so I go back even further, another 15 years before that. And a lot of things have changed, but a lot of things have not, and more so than I would think in other parts of the country even. An example of that is Middlebury College. You're all part of Middlebury College. When I moved here with my family in 1960, it was by far the largest employer in town and had a ton of influence on the town. I would make that statement today. I mean, and you live here and you're part of Middlebury College, so you probably appreciate the truth of that. I mean, we built another bridge across Otter Creek, and that's a change, but is it really that big a change?
We're still the same town. Yeah.
And how do you think the meaning of this quote has changed over time that now it is being preserved as a museum collection? And how do you wish younger generations, such as us students, to notice and understand when we're looking at this quote today?
It's hard for me to know how a younger generation feels about it. I'm happy that I was a part of making it. Maybe in another 50 years, there will be even more changes. One of the reasons it was donated to the museum was just so that it would be here for future generations. But I look at it and go, it's changed. Our lives have all changed, but I hope it stays a part of history.
And this was pretty creative, just like an open-ended question. If the Middlebury community created another quote like this for 2026, what do you think is going to be different compared to the one created in 1976?
Some of the buildings would be different. I mean, we concentrated heavily on buildings, so some would be different, and they would include other things. Going back to the bridge, they would include the new bridge. I don't know what we do about the library now because it's under construction and it sure doesn't look like it used to. They would include the town hall, which is the only town hall you've seen, but the town hall was a different building, which I don't know if we had it on there. It's been knocked down, so it's not there anymore. And I don't think we have it on here. Unless, what's this supposed to be? That might be the town hall. Does somebody have the legend? It didn't quite look like that, but it looked a little bit like that. Right here.
I think that's the post office.
That's the
It's post office.
Yes.
Oh, that's the post office. Okay. The town hall was kind of a square building with,
Yeah, it seems like the town hall is not on here.
Yeah.
yeah,
Unfortunately.
and it was not an overly attractive building. It used to be a school and had had a fire, so they took off the top story and repurposed it to a town hall. Anyway, it got knocked down. So I don't know, but a lot of them might be the same. People don't make quilts like this anymore. It's kind of, I don't know anybody that's made one in the last 30, 40 years.
So shortly after you made this quilt, this kind of tradition just stopped, like in 80s.
No, I think it was popular during the 70s. It was to make commemorative quilts like this. And there were certainly people who still like to quilt, but doing the commemorative kind of thing, you don't see much anymore.
Do you know any other counties back in the time that were also?
I forgot to turn that off, I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Here, let me get rid of it, okay.
Do you remember any other counties at the time that were also doing these kind of quotes? Or I also know that
I didn't know of any at the time, no.
Okay. And
Doesn't mean they didn't exist and didn't do it.
And I also know that you made a similar quote for your husband's parents' wedding anniversary.
Yep.
Do you know any other families that are doing some kind of things like that?
I don't personally know them, but it was much more popular to do that kind of thing. So I suspect there are some. In fact, I don't know if the Sheldon Museum has any others. I know they have our family one because when my husband's parents died and we had to repurpose their house to someone out of the family, it was about as big as this one, and nobody had a place to hang it in their house. It takes a lot of wall space.
So I think those were all
Yeah,
the
that's all we
questions
got.
prepared.
Those are all the questions.
Yeah.
Can I speed a question for you to ask Nancy?
Yeah, sure.
I was hoping you could ask her about the materials she used, like where the fabrics came from.
Oh.
What she sourced them, and then maybe comparing sewing the dress for your daughter. What fabrics you used, what colors it was, and things like that.
I sewed a lot at that time. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I had time to do it, and my husband was a farmer. We didn't have a lot of money to go shopping, and I could make really nice dresses for my daughters that I couldn't afford to buy. So there were actually stores in Middlebury where you could buy fabric. What used to be the Ben Franklin, it's got the frozen yogurt shop in it right next to. They had a huge fabric department, and I don't remember specifically, but there's a really, really good chance that most of the fabric came from the Ben Franklin down on Main Street, because that's where most of us bought our fabric. I mean, now there's a fabric store out in the Hannaford Shopping Center, but that's new on a relative point. So and for me, yeah, I'm pretty sure most of those were fabric scraps that either I had or my mother-in-law had. And so I just put them together. And I suspect a lot of people did that. We didn't go out and spend a lot of money on fabric because we had fabric. It was stuff we bought on a regular basis. I don't buy fabric anymore.
It's hard to find. Yeah.
Anything else?
Do you guys have any questions that we want to feed to Nancy or the group? Thank you so much for meeting with us.
I was happy to. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellery Foutch, Associate Professor of American Studies at Middlebury College, and I'm here with Brooke, a student in my Remembering the Revolution class.
Hi, my name's Brooke. I'm a senior at Middlebury.
Very exciting. And we're here to talk about the object you've been researching this semester. What can you tell us about it?
So, the Washington National Monument is one of the most iconic and well-known symbols of America, and it's pretty easy to think of it as if it's always been there and as if it's permanent, but this box actually tells us quite a different story. So, in the 1850s, about 6 years after construction began on the monument, it had to be halted due to a lack of funding. So the Washington National Monument Society, the organization overseeing the construction, asked postmasters across the country to place boxes like this one all across the country in their respective offices so that civilians could donate to the project. So this opened up the construction of the Washington Monument into a national project where citizens could contribute. And you'll notice that the box is pretty small, and this is because they asked for just a few cents per visit to the post office. And unfortunately, this didn't quite work to finish the monument's construction because political tensions and the Civil War further disrupted people's willingness to donate, and ultimately in 1884 the monument had to be finished with government funding. But I love this box because I think that it tells us a story and a side of the Washington Monument that we often don't think of or don't consider.
Great. Thank you so much. It's very exciting. Noah, thank you so much for coming in to talk about a little bit about your research into the Crispus Attucks graphic novel. What can you tell us? What have you discovered?
Yeah, so this is one of many comic books in a series published by Golden Legacy, which they published a bunch of comic books in the 1960s about prominent Black figures in the United States and across the world in a lot of civil rights and freedom struggles. This particular comic focuses on Crispus Attucks, who a lot of us learn about in the Boston Massacre. And I think that this particular comic is very important in including in an exhibit like ours, because oftentimes when we learn about the Boston Massacre, Crispus Attucks is a relatively peripheral figure. We learn about Paul Revere and his engravings. We learn about how the colonists were enraged at the Redcoats, and we kind of gloss over Crispus Attucks' role in his leadership in the Boston Massacre and what his death meant in the colonies. And so this comic book tries to center his experience as well as the lives and experiences of Black Americans during the Revolution.
Awesome. Thank you. I feel like this is a really important artifact, not only about 1775, 1776, but also maybe about 1968. And I think you've done a little research into some of the people behind the making of the object too. Would you be able to share about that?
Exactly. So, yeah, during kind of the height of the Civil Rights Movement, one of the artists and authors of this book is a woman named Joan Bacchus, who was a critical person in preserving some of the Black neighborhoods in Brooklyn that were prominent in the Civil War era. And so she worked to preserve some of that history in the Brooklyn area. And she has a really great quote in a New York Times article that I researched about how Black kids and Black Americans need to know this history and where they come from to know their value in American history and the roots of our country.
Great. Yeah, representation matters, and Black history is American history. So
Exactly.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Sabrina. I'm a junior at Middlebury.
Hi, I'm Henry. I'm a senior economics and German major.
Awesome. And you guys have been researching powder horns. What have you learned so far?
Yeah, I guess I can go first. So this horn right here was made in 1775. It was Amarius Storr's powder horn, who lived from 1728 to 1806. He was based in Mansfield, Connecticut, so a New England resident. And we actually received this powder horn from the Foster family, who's a prominent Middlebury community member. Yeah.
Awesome.
This is Benjamin Agard's horn, which was made in 1771, and it was donated by a person named Orrin Abbey. It's a cow's horn with engraved inscriptions on it, and we aren't sure if Benjamin Agard made the inscriptions himself or if he hired a professional engraver. But yeah, so this was made 4 years before the Revolution, and it shows the personal and functional nature of powder horns as military equipment. And they were also used as a form of personal identification and artistic expression, which explains why Agard inscribed his name and date, as well as you can see a ship, a house, and a bird. So yeah, this was kind of their way of carrying their identity forward through time.
Yeah, so I think a lot of powder horns from New England, a lot of them were used during the French Indian Wars. So oftentimes common soldiers would not have access to maps, or only their superiors would. So it's not listed on any of these, but oftentimes they would follow their journey by inscribing a map of their of where they've been and where they're going, so they kind of have a way to orient themselves in the world. And I think Sabrina, as well as mine, has some very typical types of images. A lot of the New England powderhorns had ships, given we were close to the Atlantic. There's a lot of family crests were used as well. Here you can see, I think that's called a brig type of ship. And then I think you can see on Sabrina's horn here, there's a lot of sort of mythical figures used on these horns, and those date back to Greek and Roman times and have bring with them like an idea of war and death. That's kind of what those like hellhound animals were basically meant to evoke. I think you can see with these powderhorns how they basically followed a soldier's lifetime while also allowing them to express themselves and kind of how they were feeling at the time.
That's great. I love the ferocity of the dragon in your Sabrina, and that kind of reminds me too of the ways in which these helped literally make an explosion for the soldiers' defense too.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So that's some of our research and a little preview into the exhibit. If you liked what you saw, I hope you'll come join us at the Henry Sheldon Museum. Our exhibit opening is Wednesday, May 20th from 4 to 6 p.m. There'll be refreshments. You'll get to see all kinds of exciting exhibits. And the exhibit is up until from May 20th until early January. The museum is open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 4 p.m. So I hope you'll come on by. Thank you so much.